going 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome, everybody, to Cultivated Live. It is Friday, February 14th, this Valentine's Day. I'm Jeremy Berke. I'm the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Cultivated. We're here with Tony Repanich of Shield Compliance. Tony, welcome to the show, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Happy Valentine's Day. We get to talk about our favorite subject, the one we love most.
Cannabis banking on Valentine's Day. We love it. So, Tony, could you start off? Tell us a little bit about Shield Compliance, who you are, and what you do for the industry.
Yeah, so we work with banks and credit unions around the country who have embarked upon serving the legalized cannabis industry. You know, there's a little fewer than 10,000 banks and credit unions in the country, but only about 240 that serve the legalized cannabis industry. And that's largely because there's this high compliance requirement because of the difference between state and federal law. We're all kind of working under this FinCEN guidance that was issued in 2014. And so our software solution is designed to help those bankers automate many of those processes, collect lots of extra data about the licensed operators, and then use that in their ongoing monitoring and reporting as required under that guidance.
Yeah. And can you set the stage for maybe some viewers who are a little bit less aware of the cannabis industry? Like why do you need novel banking solutions specifically for cannabis companies? And what do the regulations look like right now?
Yeah, so, you know, the big concern with the legalized cannabis industry is the fact that, number one, it's Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act. So it's viewed as being illegal or illicit at the federal level. And so there's really this carve out created under the FinCEN guidance for banks to be able to serve state licensed cannabis operators. Sort of the trade-off for that is that bankers are required to provide significant additional due diligence to really understand the licensing that's been issued to these operators and the status of that license throughout the course of the relationship. A closer look at the people associated with these businesses. I think one of the initial concerns, especially in the early days of cannabis banking, was will unsavory individuals try to attach themselves to legal operations? And bankers need to know that that's not the case. And then, you know, the legalized cannabis industry is half what the illicit market is today. So making sure that the bank is not transacting in funds that are generated outside the legal system. And so there's just a lot more data required to do that. And then the government has said, if you're going to serve these customers, then you should provide additional reporting to FinCEN in the form of suspicious activity reports on a regular basis about your activities, which, you know, take a typical community bank we might work with. They might file 50 of these suspicious activity reports in a year. Now that they're banking the cannabis industry, they might be filing 500 a quarter. And there's significant work required for each of those suspicious activity reports. So how do you create efficiency in that reporting process that's different than what you might be doing for your typical commercial client?
Yeah. So we have a relatively now new administration in Washington, D.C. We have Republican control of the Senate and the House. What are bankers that work in the cannabis industry thinking about under this new order we have in D.C. and what do you expect to see happen, you know, over the next year or two?
Well, I think there's some mixed opinions. I was just at a banker conference in Arizona just 2 weeks ago, and I will say the vibes were pretty good there with the bankers. They've been under some pretty strict oversight, especially when it comes to consumer protections and scrutiny of bank operations by the Biden administration. Think about just the things that are happening in the last week at the CFPB, and one of the agencies that bankers are least thrilled with. And so I think on one hand, bankers are looking at it and saying, gosh, I'm going to have a lot more freedom to serve different industries and to extend our services, maybe with less oversight or less scrutiny of the things that we're doing. When it comes to cannabis in particular, I think there's a realization, however, that this administration is a mixed bag. And I think your reporting has done a great job of illustrating that. You've got Trump, who I think generally is sort of like, yeah, let business be business. And some real hardliners within his administration that are pretty anti-cannabis. Pam Bondi, I think, spearheaded an initiative in Florida to basically link fentanyl usage to cannabis as a gateway to that kind of drug use. And we've seen others, I think the new DEA chief is also somebody who's been very outspoken about his opposition to cannabis legalization. And so, barring some sort of personality event, meaning Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart show up at the White House for lunch, and all of a sudden we're doing everything cannabis, I don't think we're going to see a lot of movement. And the House and the Senate, those leaders are also they have very little political motivation or personal motivation to do much either.
And given this idea that movement on federal cannabis reform may be slow, like, how should cannabis businesses, how should your clients be thinking about this and approaching this? Is it business as usual, like it was the last 4 years, or is there anything else they should be doing and thinking about?
Well, I think the good news is that there's pretty good agreement that while we might not be moving forward at the pace that people would like, we are also unlikely to move backwards. This is becoming pretty big business. Right. And the states are dependent on these tax revenues. There's some pretty influential businesses that are lobbying the administration. And so I think from a banking standpoint and an operator standpoint, you're still going to be in a situation where there's a limited number of financial institutions serving this industry. But in almost every market now, operators have choice. And so there's opportunity for new bankers to enter in certain markets. And I think that the good news for the licensed operator community is, I think, given the increased competition, they're going to be able to ask for more and more from their financial institution. I'm already seeing that in terms of better rates and fees when you have significant balances. And we're seeing for some of the most well-qualified businesses the opportunity to obtain credit facilities.
Yeah. And, for many of our viewers who are probably cannabis businesses who maybe are unhappy with their banking relationship or looking for a banking relationship, like, what do they need to get into order to make them an attractive client for something like Shield Compliance or someone else? Like, what should they be thinking about? What T's do they need to cross and I's do they need to dot to be in a good position?
Well, I think I first step back and say, what's my business plan for my business? What do I anticipate I'm going to need from a financial institution over the next 2 to 3 years? Changing banks is hard work. I ran a community bank for a number of years. Convincing business owners to change banks is one of the hardest things to do, because if a banker has done a good job, they are sort of integral to the day-to-day operations of that business. And so to unwind all of that and make that change is time-consuming and costly. So make a good decision by knowing that you've got a banking partner that can grow with you. So know where you're going and what you might need. And so that's going to inform the questions you ask about the products and services that banker is willing to consider for you as a cannabis company. For example, if you think you might have some international investors, or you may need to start sourcing some component parts of your wholesale business, not the cannabis itself, but maybe packaging or other supplies from international sources, then how are you going to make those payments? Do I have the right partner that can help me to facilitate those payments and not make it extraordinarily difficult for me? As far as crossing your I's and dotting your I's and crossing your T's, excuse my voice, that cold medicine is really starting to kick in. I think it's important to understand that these bankers are required to collect a significant amount of information about your business before they start transacting with you. And so understand that there is this underwriting process that the bankers have to go through to satisfy their regulators. So it's being organized in that, just like you are organized to get your license and to do your license renewals, the same sorts of things are going to be required by your banker. The more transparent you can be in those early stages, the smoother the process will be. The banker has no option but to sort of do that deep dive into your business and the underlying owners of that license and the business itself. So expect that and plan for the time it takes to do that. And then as your business changes, communicate with your banker on a regular basis. The bankers are communicating regularly with their examiners about the changing nature of the cannabis industry. It's important for operators to be talking with their bankers about the changing nature of their business and the needs that they have or that they perceive going forward. These bankers are benefiting from the cannabis businesses that they serve, and they want to retain this business. So they're open to your feedback as long as it's constructive and you understand that bankers can't always do things today, but it plants a seed that can turn into something over time.
Yeah. And then turning one last question about federal policy, hypothetically, if stuff does change, we can talk about 280E being removed, rescheduling, if that happens. How does that change both your business and maybe the way that you would approach and look for clients?
Well, I think we know there's billions of dollars in loans out to the cannabis industry today. Almost all of that is private money. Mm-hmm. As the industry begins to right size, in some cases consolidate, or certain operators go away, what will be left is stronger, better capitalized ownership groups or management teams. And I would expect that bankers are going to want to lend to those teams. Now, things like 280E reform will make these businesses more attractive to bankers because it takes that burden off the cash flow of the business. And I guess one thing to consider is there's some businesses have been very aggressive in their accounting for 280E and taxes. That also creates risk for the financial institution when they're the lender. That if the IRS at some point disagrees with your treatment, remember, tax liens are superior. And so you don't want to be in a position as a banker where the IRS is ahead of you. And so understanding if we're stuck with 280E, that being super aggressive to free up a bunch of cash flow to make the cash flow side look better doesn't necessarily negate all the risk associated with your business, because now you have this sort of off balance sheet risk of possible tax repercussions. So keep that in mind. Bankers might want to understand your 280E tax treatment, but obviously reform in that area would be significant for bankers to step up and look at it. For our business, how we look at it is for the Bank Secrecy Act and anti-money laundering component of the bank, which is responsible for the FinCEN rules and requirements that financial institutions follow, they're collecting a lot of data about that licensed operator's business. It's pretty valuable data around the sales and cash flow of that business, some of it in almost real time, getting nightly sales data from Metric or BioTrack. That information could be really valuable to a lender to evaluate the healthiness of a business. And by having those early warning indicators of potential changes to business health, could allow them to feel more comfortable about lending also. So we see an opportunity to leverage that information outside of the BSA area and into the credit risk area as more and more lenders say, hey, not only do we want to take their deposits, but we also want to consider them to be a borrower.
Yeah. We're about coming up on time here. Tony, really appreciate all your time today and your insights. If anyone watching this wants to reach you, how can they find you?
We're at shieldbanking.com or Tony@shieldbanking.com. We'd love to engage you in a conversation.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this Valentine's Day to chat with Tony about cannabis banking. If you're interested in diving deeper with Shield compliance or any issues around the cannabis banking ecosystem, join our webinar on March 6th, where we'll be diving much deeper into all those issues. We'll be back in your inboxes on Tuesday. Thanks very much, everyone.